cannot be just. Sir, one of the things that the leader of government business noted just now is the amendments also speak to enhancing our way of doing business and improving our doing business profile and ranking. And sir, if we don't move in the direction where it is easier to do business in Barbados, and that is then the last and only thing that we have to attract investment to Barbados, then that becomes even more imperative. Sir, with little space to then increase other areas of revenue, because Barbadians are now crying out for the high rate of taxation and prices across Barbados, given the onset of the challenges associated with COVID. There's very little room for the government then to increase taxes. And there's also very little room to cut expenditure, because it would be irresponsible of the government at a time like this where private sector activity is struggling to keep pace. The government then cuts any type of social spending because it still needs to ensure the well-being of its citizens and to ensure that their basic needs are still being met. So, sir, we are becoming very quickly between a rock and a hard place, essentially. And these types of arrangements that the international community sees as being important for, first and foremostly, I believe, themselves, and then to others, it's something that's going to have serious fiscal implications if the details of these types of arrangements are not fashioned in a way that countries like Barbados, other small island developing states, and particularly small island developing states, have room for negotiations within this type of development. So, sir, it is still very early days yet. I believe that a final decision on this global minimum corporation tax is to be cited, I believe, in October. I stand corrected on that, and the implementation is supposed to be sometime in 2023. But sir, nonetheless, it is a significant development, and plans need to be put in place if we will have to abide by this move. And sir, what it also does, it restricts our ability to attract new investment to Barbados. Because if we cannot show that we are somehow more attractive than the other jurisdictions that have the same tax rate, then what is it then that is bringing new business to our shores? And these are the types of questions that we have to ask as we plan for the economic development of Barbados going forward in what is clearly a very difficult time for our country. Sir, I know a lot of the time we say, the opposition opposes for opposers' sake, and I really try not to premise my contributions on that type of ethos. And sir, the question then is, I know they would ask, so what would you do? What is your solution? I do have a solution, a possible solution. I'm not sure if my honourable friend on the other side will have any reservations like he did last time, but nonetheless, a possible solution, Mr. President. Sir, it could be that what we do is pivot away from the traditional way of taxing corporations. We then would have to set up what I would call a national ECG score for businesses. ECG scores are environmental, social, and governance principles that govern the way in which businesses are deemed either sustainable or not sustainable. Sir, and by putting together ECG, environmental, social, and governance principles. ES. My complete apologies. ESG, yeah, it might be. ESG principles, Mr. President. I know I'm going to focus, Mr. President, on my presentation to you. ESG principles, because I want to get this right. If Barbados can pivot away from primarily taxing on or giving exemptions primarily on income, we move the goalposts for our companies to become more environmentally sustainable, socially responsible, and have good governance practices. So for instance, you would either get exemptions or a lower tax score based on your principles if you have energy efficiency, if you have water efficiency. Those types of metrics would then be used to assess businesses. In the social indicator, is it that the business is up to date with its NIS payments for its workers and its employees? Does it have the availability of daycare services? These are the types of things that we would now measure businesses by and tax them based off of. On their governance, do you have a diverse board of directors? Is it a gender balanced board? How many of your senior managers, if it is an international company, how many of them are Barbadians? So these ESG scores would then be tied to the level of taxation that the companies pay, rather than primarily be driven by only profits. Because, sir, what that would do is place Barbados in a position to then dictate what is important to us, how many taxes we believe we can get from that type of policy mandate, and we would be leading the pack. Because as it stands right now, I do not believe that ESG principles are adopted at a national level that is tied to corporation tax. We could be the vanguards in this type of approach. So, sir, what it would be then is that we incentivize firms to move towards sustainability practices rather than simply profit. And that in and of itself could attract responsible investment into Barbados. So, sir, based on the changing environment, I believe these are the types of creative policies that we have to now start to think about, because the old game is being won by the old players. It was never our game to play, and it was never our game to win. The odds were always against us. So now, how do we sit and plan and think about new ways by which we can have fiscal sustainability for our own country based on the dictates of what is necessary for us, Mr. President? Sir, and I believe that that type of policy would shift the entire purpose of the economic system in Barbados. Far too many times we see businesses in Barbados where workers' rights are being trampled. Sir, and as far as the environmental sustainability is concerned, it is non-existent. Sir, we have to ensure that the new policies that we create include people and include nature. Sir, those were my substantive points, but I want to end with a personal plea as it relates to Barbados's corporate affairs and intellectual property office. Mr. President, I had to visit corporate affairs a few weeks ago. So I got there after 9, and I left just about 1:45. No, very simple transaction I wanted to. A very simple transaction I wanted to have done. 9:30 to 1:45 in the afternoon. Sir, people were standing outside in the rain and in the sun. And I am making a plea to the minister that there has to be something fundamentally wrong with the operations at Corporate Affairs, CAIPO. Because my personal experience, Mr. President, I was actually ashamed to be a Barbadian. And I'm not kidding when I say this, and I really want to make this plea this morning. It cannot be that we are getting up in this honorable chamber, passing pieces of legislation that sound good and tick boxes for people elsewhere, and Barbadians going into these organizations and being meted out with the type of treatment that they receive. Mr. President, the experience I have was nothing short of disgusting and rude. Sir, I am a law-abiding citizen. I pay my taxes. The only person that gave me any comfort in that office was the guard. It cannot be that in 2021, Mr. President, we have a corporate affairs, CAIPO as it's known, where people are standing in a line for over 4 hours. The office seems as though no one knows what is going on. The work ethic seems to be through the door and elsewhere, and it is a mass of confusion. And I don't know if it is a symptom of the management style. I don't know if it is how the workers themselves are being treated, and thus that treatment is then translated to the customers who are coming in. But something is wrong. We cannot be talking about doing business rankings and all these other lofty things that people feel are esoteric, because when you get on the ground, Mr. President, the treatment is nothing less than atrocious. So I am making a plea to the minister responsible. Please see if there can be some type of management audit, some type of evaluation, and find out what is really wrong in CAIPO. Because we can't be telling people to start businesses and do this and do the next to add to the economic activity of Barbados. And then I thought, sir, that my experience had to be an anomaly. I said, no, this can't be. This got to be an off day for corporate affairs. To then be told by numerous people, no, that's how it is. That is the standard. Sir, no, it cannot contain. It is unattainable. It cannot. That is not sustainable in a Barbados of 2021, where we are trying our best to keep the country afloat. Everyone, as the government says, has to play their part, has to play their role. But that, Mr. President, that experience, that is not who we are. Mr. President, I am obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Driggs. Senator Greenwich.
Mr. President, I did make a few notes on this particular topic. 2 pages, man. But, sir, I begin by saying that it really hurts me when week after week and month after month and year after year, I hear people, as my mother always said, I hear people washing their mouths on Barbados. My mother used to say that she doesn't like to hear people wash their mouths on her friends and her family. And I go a little step beyond that and say I do not like to hear people washing their mouths, my friends, my family, nor Barbados. And sir, very often, the people who do this are our own people. People who have gone overseas for a few years and then they come back and they live here. And then everything they do and everything they see here is compared to what happened overseas. Also, there are people who actually are not Barbadians and they're doing business in Barbados, and they too complain. Here, sir, is some of what they say. They say that there's too much red tape in this country for them to get anything done. They also say, sir, that our banking systems are archaic, that our civil service structure slows down progress. They say that we must get rid of the bureaucracy in order to expedite things in the public service. They say too, sir, that there's too much duplication of the same procedure. Indeed, one fellow said, what is done on the second desk and the third desk is virtually the same thing that was done on the first desk. The end result of all that is being said is that all of these things hinder the progression of corporate activity in this country. And sir, we have a duty to reverse these criticisms. And let me say very early and up front too, sir, that these are not criticisms aimed at this administration. These are perennial criticisms. These are criticisms maybe from the time I was a boy at school in short pants. Long, long, long time ago. And these are criticisms irrespective of which government is in office. And sir, the purpose of legislation such as this Corporate Miscellaneous Provisions Bill is to improve the ease of doing business in Barbados. So the idea is to remove as many existing obstacles as possible by changing sections within our legislation in order to facilitate action and progress. In this case, the particular piece of legislation where the majority of changes is occurring is with our Cap 308 company law. And put it succinctly as possible, we have to change clauses to suit the times. Let me say so that the Company Act is an extremely complex piece of legislation. It regulates all matters dealing with companies. In other words, sir, from incorporation, the time you form the company, until the winding up of the company, and everything in between there. It covers essentially everything in relation to a company. It's not surprising, sir, that our Companies Act has over 450 sections. Over 450 sections. From incorporation to the winding up, every single thing in between. It's a massive act. And I say that, sir, because I want to make the point that law is not static. Law is not static. It cannot be static. Law must move with the times. And sir, we have to amend and we have to conform to suit the prevailing norms. Mr. President, as you would know, sir, virtual meetings are now the new normal. And we have to validate a lot of what is going on in this new normal. Now, the existing legislation, Cap 308, and the bylaws of many companies, nearly all of them, and even the traditions of companies, they have all insisted that meetings are only legit if they are held in the boardroom of the registered office of the company. The Act is very specific. Let me tell you, sir, how Section 103 of our Companies Act is worded. It says, sir, meetings of shareholders of a company must, I emphasize that word, sir, must be held at the place within Barbados provided in the bylaws, or in the absence of such a provision. And I could tell you there's hardly a company that doesn't say it. When they say in the absence of such a provision, then it can be held at a place within Barbados that the directors determine. That is what the law is. So, for meetings of shareholders to be legit, sir, they can't be done at home. Can't be done with somebody overseas. And indeed, if you have shareholders in that particular shareholders meeting who are at home and who are overseas, without this piece of legislation, they may very well taint the meeting. And someone will argue, well, this is not a legitimate shareholders meeting. So, sir, this legislation now gives legitimacy to virtual meetings. Let me see, sir, what the actual new legislation says, the one that we are amending, the one we are putting in. It says, notwithstanding what I just read in subsection 1, a meeting of shareholders of a company may be held virtually. May be held virtually. For the avoidance of doubt, it goes on, where a meeting is held virtually, the location, whether within or outside of Barbados, of any participant in the meeting shall not render the meeting unlawful. And sir, you can't want it clearer than that. This is really and truly bending over backwards to accommodate virtual meetings. We do not want to have a situation where we're saying COVID is too long now, COVID is long, and it is not possible for us to have any meetings, and so everything in that company is held up. We're talking about the ease of doing business. And this is what that particular section is setting out to do. It is like, business is like the bicycle. If you don't, when you get on that bicycle and you don't keep pedaling, so you'll fall off. And you have to keep business going. You have to keep moving. So now you can have business going on, and you can have a legally constituted quorum of shareholders at a virtual meeting. So some of these are these amendments go very deep, very far in facilitating business. So the bill also expands the pool of notaries public in Barbados. I personally, sir, have always held the view that there are too few notaries public in Barbados. Indeed, one of the most asked questions when you are in the precincts of the law courts is, where can I find a notary public? People will be in the car park. They know you have to go somewhere in that area, and they're always asking that question. Where can I find a notary public? In fact, there was a time when the only notaries on this island would have been the registrar of the Supreme Court and the 2 deputies and an assistant registrar. And that was the end of it. Well, since then, we've had a few more additions. Indeed, not so long ago, I was checking the Notary Public Act to realize that it had been broadened, and that now permanent secretaries in certain ministries were also able to act as notaries. I would think, sir, that in all, in Barbados, we may get 15 or 20. And to my mind, that still is not enough for the international business that we do, the number of documents we have to sign and send on overseas, and so on. And I still think that that is not good enough. I like the idea, sir, of keeping the notaries public in Barbados public. I like the idea of keeping them. And what I mean by that, I do not like the idea of having private persons doing our work as the notaries public. I do not like that idea at all, because I know what is going to happen. That those persons are going to charge a fee. And overseas they are bound. And they read your document, yes, and they affix their seal and their signature to it, but you have to pay for that service. They operate like lawyers. They charge for it. And the ones that we have, being a notary public is part of their job description. And what they do not charge for. And I would rather see how long we can keep it that way. Sir, I have my own idea as to what should happen. I know that in other ministries they say that the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the permanent secretary, Ministry of Home Affairs, and so on, they can act as notaries, a few other ministries. And I'm being facilitated by permanent secretary, Foreign Affairs, Home Affairs, International Business, Attorney General, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Foreign Affairs, Home Affairs, International Business, and so on. They're the ones who act. But my own idea is that I would have appointed persons in key ministries. Some of them have been listed there. But a grade or two below the permanent secretary as well. Not simply because sometimes the hardest person to find in a ministry is the permanent secretary. And so there's a fact. And I would rather, if we had a few grades below, I don't want down to the clerk, typist, and so on, but a few grades below to act as And indeed, sir, one of the ministries I think that should always have is the Ministry of Education. Because, sir, we do not realize the number of persons who are in contact with universities overseas, who have to send documents overseas, the number of people who are on athletic scholarships and so on, and they are dealing directly with the Ministry of Education, you know. And if you had 2 or 3 persons there, they could sign it without having to walk over to the court and ask, where can I find a notary public? So I still think that there are some other ministries that can be added to the whole, to what we have here in the Notary Public Act. And we can publish that list, and so people would know where to find the Notary Public and so on for having documents which they need signed. Mr. President, I know of the argument which Senator Drakes made, an argument that this legislation which we're dealing with today, that it hinges mainly on the fact that we have to be compliant with our international obligations. I know that, and I'll say up front, sir, that what she said is true. It's a fact. And we have to keep abreast of what is going on and be wary of what is happening in regard to money laundering and so on. Yes, we have to comply. But sir, if we have to meet certain international standards, we have to meet them or be blacklisted. And it will be to our detriment. And only Barbados will suffer. It will be to our detriment. But sir, there are some people who would have this nobody can tell me what to do attitude, and you push your chest up in the air, and then the country suffers. And we are not going that route. We have to comply, and we are compliant. But if, sir, at the same time, we are adhering to our international obligations, if our domestic company law becomes stronger and faster and better, I think, sir, that it is a win-win situation in the eyes of the international onlookers and a win-win situation for our local companies, because we would have up-to-date company law. It would be good legislation for locally, and it would also be necessary legislation for the international obligation. So, sir, even if this is a measure where we are first and foremost about our international obligations, I don't think, sir, that, as Senator Drakes hinted to, I don't think it should be a contentious debate at all, because there's nothing really and truly controversial about it. Even for those who want to hold a party line, there's nothing really and truly contentious about this. Sir, I must say too that I've also heard the argument that it is not only Barbados that is slow. There are other countries like country A, B, C, and D who are slow as well. And what we are hurting our heads about, that it's no problem, there are others like us. I think, sir, that is a very backward position for us to take. And this government will not make that particular argument their comfort zone at all. So we cannot have big conglomerates, big insurance companies picking themselves up and heading to other destinations nearby simply because we are too tardy. This amounts to a significant loss of revenue for Barbados. So this idea that other places are slow is not going to be our comfort zone at all. But Mr. President, I have a caveat to what I have said so far. It is this, sir, and please do not misunderstand me. I am not saying, sir, that we should devote our attention to the speed of doing business and at the same time neglect all of those positive attributes which have served us so well over the years. Sir, we as a government do not want to attract the wrong companies or the wrong businessmen to these shores. Very often, Mr. President, hasty work is bad work. And we do not want to be known as a place, yes, I see someone laugh when they say that hasty work is bad work. But we do not want to be known as a place where business is done very quickly, but where no proper due diligence is done. And we cannot, sir, at this stage of our development, sacrifice the quality of destination which we have built up over the years on the altar of speed and expediency. We do not want our reputation, sir, to fall to the bottom of the spectrum. We do not want to attract the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sir, we must ensure that money launderers, that rogues and rascals are kept out. And we should not be snatching at everything. And we will continue to take time to do our due diligence properly. Sir, I believe that the background of those who want to set up companies in Barbados, the background of those who want to set up medical schools in Barbados should be properly checked. Sir, well, Sir, speed is not the only thing which matters in doing business. So, Mr. President, as I close, I want to say that if there's one thing I know is that this government cannot be accused in this regard of doing nothing. You can't accuse this government for that. It had the foresight to set up a ministry such as the one that Senator McConney has responsibility for, information and smart technology, set up primarily to inject life and speed into a lot of the public service. And 3 weeks ago, I remember we had a similar piece of legislation aimed at speeding up things in international business. So, sir, I know that from time to time accusations have been made about the government. Yes, we may be accused of bringing too much legislation. I heard that one. We may be accused of rushing the legislation. I heard of that too. We may be accused of not giving enough time to prepare for the debates and so on. But one thing, it cannot be said that this government is not making an effort to improve the ease of doing business in Barbados. And so, sir, I fully support this corporate miscellaneous provisions bill. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Greenwich. Senator Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. So far, I found the debate a very good one. I would associate myself closely with just about everything that's been said. I found Senator Drake's presentation a good one, indeed, where she spoke about the OECD actions and the 15%. This is something we discussed in the Company Amendments Act, I think back in June to some degree. And at that time, I was on the record as saying It's one thing to be a good global citizen, but it's another to swallow what is clearly, if that 15% is going to be rammed down our throats, a breach, I think, of sovereignty. That said, I'm more optimistic than she is generally. I think that it's always been the case that we have tried to duck and dive between what is thrown at us by the G7, the EU, and the Financial Action Task Force, which is part of the OECD's creation. And I think we'll continue to thrive. We have smart people. The industry has been in existence for a long time. And she made a call to action to deal with what's going on. I think that's already underway. It's just these things do take a little bit of time, and you don't want to show your hand all at once. I will just say one thing on that count, though. We know that the G7, the OECD, when it comes to deciding these matters, they like to talk about a multilateral approach. But G7 has 7 countries. Even the Financial Action Task Force, their plenary committee, I think is 39 countries. And we're talking about a world with 194 sovereign nations and I think 200 odd different jurisdictions if you toss in a couple of others. So it's not really a multilateral approach that they're talking about. But within all of those countries, there's several with whom I think we have a natural allegiance, although we wouldn't always recognize it. The Irelands of the world, the Switzerlands, the Luxembourgs, and others who don't like to be painted with this brush that everybody's a tax haven looking to cheat somebody else's hard-working citizens of tax money. I mean, that is a absolute caricature of what actually happens. I also liked her point very much about ESG. I'll start off as ECG, but I think we ended up in the right place. That's important. I think that's a niche activity we should look at. I'm not sure that could be the single driver to increase revenues from offshore or international financial services, but I hope somebody is paying close attention to that one. One of the reasons I wanted to get up on and talk today was specifically about the Financial Action Task Force. When the Leader of Government Business introduced the bill, he did speak about the changes that are being made to bolster identification and real-time identification of beneficial ownership. For those of you who've looked at the Financial Action Task Force fairly closely, it's actually a fantastic matrix that they put together to measure how countries are faring. There are 40 recommendations that they've had in existence, I think, since 1989, or at least shortly thereafter. And against all these 40 recommendations, which cover a whole plethora of different things, they also try to measure the effectiveness of different nations. Now, in Barbados' case, the most recent review that was undertaken, it was compliant or partially compliant with every single one of these 40 recommendations. That's a bit of a change from the penultimate review when it was non-compliant in 2 areas. So already this administration has made important strides in at least making the country fully compliant. Let me rephrase that, because there are different degrees of compliance, but compliant at least with everything that the Financial Action Task Force has laid down. Where we are weak on that matrix is on effectiveness. There are 11 measures of effectiveness, and we are below standard on 7. Now, when I started looking at this, I thought that struck me as notable. I was going to say curious, but notable. Some of these things relate to the very points that Senator Drake has spoken about. KIPO, I think, would be one reason where maybe we're not as effective as we could be in some areas and others. There may be things related to the strength of regulators, how able they are to levy sanctions and so on. There may be issues around resourcing. You know, a relatively poor country compared to North American and European nations like Barbados can't always have the resources to throw at all these 40 recommendations and make sure we're effective in every single one. So we start off on a playing field that really isn't entirely level, but nonetheless, for reasons that Senator Greenwich pointed out and everybody here knows about, compliance is important because you don't want to be on a blacklist. So we do have to play that game. However, when you look at this very comprehensive matrix that the Financial Action Task Force has put together, you need a big screen for this because it's actually 51 rows across, and a lot of countries down. And then everything is color-coded because there are different grades that you can be assigned. When you look at this closely, and you look at a Barbados and you think, okay, we have room to improve, we know that. And many of these things that we've spoken about are the reason we should be listening to the FATF. We should be doing these things to improve our processes, make things work better for us, not only for international business, attracting investment and so on. And again, we spoke about this a little bit in June with the Company Economic Substance Act. But the overwhelming thing that struck me was that in the last 15 years or so, there have been a number of massive AML breaches that have struck the globe. Most notable, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with this, but there are a couple. One is known as the Russian laundromat, the other is the Troika Dialogue laundromat. Troika Dialogue was a Russian private investment bank that facilitated the laundering of at least 23 billion euros. That's 23 billion euros, BN. This is a lot of money. Our annual GNP in a good year is around 4 billion US. And now we're talking about 30 billion euros, as you tack on about 20% 23 million euros, you tack on 20% or thereabouts, and you're well above 25, 26 billion US dollars. So you're talking about money 5 to 6 times our national GNP being laundered. And this is just one incident. If I add the two of them together, it's 40 billion US dollars, the Russian Troika and the Russian laundromat and the Troika Dialogue case. But now both of those ended around 2012, 2014, but some of the investigations are still going on to work out where all this money has gone. What are the results of some of those recommendations so far? So, 23.6 billion. The investigative journalists who looked through this carefully, and it's been subsequently confirmed by many regulators around the world, they found that 6.5 billion went through Lithuania, 2.6 billion went through Switzerland, over $1 billion went through Germany, and down the list, countries including the UK, Austria, Netherlands, Denmark, Spain. Now, when you cross-reference these countries against the Financial Action Task Force matrix, you see that all of them are classed as either moderately effective, substantially effective, or highly effective across the board in all their 40 recommendations. So I asked myself, how can it be that a matrix that is this comprehensive in assessing whether you are both effective and compliant still manages to contain members who score very highly, who collectively laundered over 11 billion euros through the system in just one major incident? I'm only talking about the Troika Dialogue now. If you add them all up, it's a lot more than that. How can that be? And then down the list you have Barbados, which doesn't feature in any of that, which has to play the game, has to be compliant. But it does beg the question, are these matrices, is the Financial Action Task Force, is the European Union, are they really focusing on outcomes? And I think that is what both Senator Greenidge and Senator Drakes ultimately were saying. We have to focus on outcomes, not just ticking boxes. Is the Financial Action Task Force doing the same? Well, I would say that the answer really is no. We know that we're getting strong-armed sometimes by these groups, that they tread on our sovereignty to some degree, and that we have to play the game. But that doesn't stop us we don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It doesn't stop us taking the point, perhaps, that things like CIPO could be improved. Maybe the Barbados Revenue Authority can coordinate better with regulators and so on. These are all things, when you read the report on Barbados, that make eminent sense. But let's not pretend that by devoting a fraction of the resources that countries like Denmark, Lithuania, Switzerland are devoting to the anti-money laundering fight, that we are going to be able to stop any group, organized crime group, that comes looking to launder 40 billion euros worth of funds. We know corruption is corrosive. If someone comes with that kind of money, you're going to get corroded. There's just no doubt whatsoever. I feel the best we can do is to improve our effectiveness in order that we're compliant. But the areas that we really need to focus on is stopping bad money getting into the system. Because things like sanctions on groups with that kind of money are going to be virtually impossible for us. Now, we know we have a situation where we were unable even to bring one case of corruption to court in this jurisdiction, and it had to be done in the United States. I'm not going to make a huge judgment on that, but there was a case to be answered. We couldn't do it in this jurisdiction. Why is that? These are the types of things that we need to do for ourselves, not just for the Financial Action Task Force and the EU and associated people really looking to embark on trade wars against us. Sir, if I could just, I think, get to a finishing point and give a couple of examples of why these things are important to us in terms of improving processes. Senator Greenwich talked about the banking system. We know the banking system here could be better. Financial services are expensive. You know? I would even go so far as to say that financial products are not tailored for the population. Rather, the population has to take what is on offer. Partly that's a function of the way banking works, but it's also a function of the costs that they face in things like KYC, AML, and so on. And those standards are handed down by our regulators. So I'm just going to take one example in particular, which is proof of address. Right? Now, Financial Action Task Force, EU, everybody, they talk about a risk-adjusted approach to dealing with KYC, AML, and so forth. Other jurisdictions around the world, notably South Africa is a particularly notable example because they've completely changed their regulation to a risk-based approach rather than a prescriptive rules-based approach which applies here. We lay down a minimum requirement for every financial transaction. That includes a proof of address requirement. Now, can you tell me why, if you want to buy, say, travel insurance, that you have to provide a proof of address for that? It makes no sense. So where there are very low value financial transactions, you apply this risk-adjusted approach. You don't demand, a biography and all kinds of identification documents if the risk does not justify it. Now that's an approach that we say we do. The regulators also say they want to do it that way, but we're not doing it. We're not always doing it, I should say. That's what we have to fight on. When we see these things come down from the Financial Action Task Force and whatnot, look carefully at where the value is. And a lot of the value is in the risk-adjusted approach. We have to maximize the money we got available. We just can't throw money at every single thing they want us to throw it at. And we have to throw it at those things that are our priorities, and hopefully there's a sufficient large overlap to also cover their requirements. And so with those few words, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Adams. Senator Dr. Holder.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I wish to offer a very short contribution to this debate today. I believe it was Senator Greenwich, as I listened to him, who made reference to the points that I actually have here listed. So I will spare the chamber the experience of going over those thoughts, Senator Greenwich, but I believe that there's one in particular that is worthy of elucidation. And we've been talking about doing business, and to place these few thoughts into context, I quite agree that it is not always speed that we ought to focus on, but equally it is process. And this legislation, Mr. President, has a key feature that improves the process of doing business for a very important sector that I've associated myself with for the last 3 decades. And I think it is worthy of us maybe expanding on that even more. I know, Mr. President, that when we come to this honorable chamber and those in the other place, and we pass legislation, many of us who have then to interface with John Public, we are often asked, well, really, what is the implication of that piece of legislation for me? How does that particular amendment affect me going to the supermarket, affect me managing my business, affect me in my community and so on? That is often, Mr. President, a question asked. And sometimes, I believe many of us in here will say that we are able to answer those questions appropriately, and there are times, if we're honest with ourselves, we are challenged. But I believe that that is not the case today, and won't be the case today with a particular part of this legislation. You see, Mr. President, we heard from the leader of government business this morning that there are four key areas, four critical areas that the amendments of this bill seek to address. And one of them has to do with improving the way business is done, especially for those smaller firms that would wish, Mr. President, to incorporate their enterprises. And it is on that particular point that I want maybe just to spend about 5 minutes to share why I think this is a step in the right direction and why this is good legislation. You see, going back to the Doing Business report for 2020, Mr. President, has been mentioned before, and we understand the significance of us working as a country, whole of country approach to try to address our ranking in this report. We know that that 2020 report suggests we are around what I think is 128, that we're at 128 out of 190 countries in that report relative to doing business. But as we drill down further and look at starting a business in that report, Mr. President, it suggests to me that we have some work to do, because we rank at 102 relative to starting a business, that component in the report. 102, that is the ranking for Barbados. And when we look across the region at some of our countries in CARICOM, we see Jamaica is at number 6. Jamaica ranked number 6, Mr. President, in the same category of starting a business. St. Lucia ranked at 69. Trinidad and Tobago ranked 79. Grenada, 89. Barbados, 102. And this is as it relates to starting a business, this component in the Ease of Doing Business report. So I'm pulling this out to suggest that this amendment here in the corporate miscellaneous provisions bill is a step in the right direction, because it is helping us to address this from the perspective of process. Because there is now the provision, Mr. President, that allows that business, that sole proprietor who wants to incorporate, to do so now without having to seek an attorney at law to certify the application for them. Now, this is significant, and therefore it wouldn't have been appropriate, I think, for me to sit and not support this particular provision and to laud our government in seeking to address this. I believe it's one of the World Bank's recommendations, but this will help definitely with how we do business, especially at the level of small firms. Now, what is the significance of this? We have thousands, Mr. President, of firms that are sole proprietorships. They just have a trading name. Actually, there is a company that I associate with as a director that within the last 3 years or so would have issued over 3,000 loans. We call them trust loans. And the majority of those recipients, of those clients, are sole proprietors. I would even suggest that the number could very well be in the 90s, percentage-wise, of that number of over 3,000 clients that are sole proprietors. All they have, Mr. President, is a trading name. They've been to Kaipo, irrespective of the challenges mentioned earlier with Kaipo, they were able to get through and get their business name. But they've been to Kaipo and they registered that name. They have a trading name. And another organization that I have the pleasure of leading, we've been collecting data for some time and obviously analyzing it to improve the services we offer. And that membership database, Mr. President, has approximately 60% of those members that are sole proprietorships. Now, why am I calling out these numbers? To show that, yes, a person wants to start a business, and the easiest thing that they can do to become formalized is register the trading name. But then maybe have the necessary training and seek to provide the technical assistance and the support to encourage these businesses now to go to the next level, Mr. President, of incorporation. You know, one of the things that we often hear that is maybe a stumbling block, if you will, that prevents this process, the cost. The cost. And what is the cost? Now, I know that there are many attorneys in the chamber. There are many attorneys that we have as our colleagues. But they will always cite the cost of the legal fees. Some, Mr. President, would have charged $2,500. I know some attorneys charge upwards to $3,000 to incorporate a business. To incorporate a business. And the truth is, we've never really stopped to maybe understand and interpret the legislation. Let's talk about the principal legislation now, what we are amending this afternoon. Because in the Companies Act, Mr. President, the legislation speaks to, I believe it is in the section Formation and Operation of Companies, Section 4, that subject to, if you would permit me, sir, to quote the Act, subject to subsection 2, one or more persons may incorporate a company by signing and sending articles of incorporation to the Registrar of Companies. And we thought that anyone, Mr. President, could simply go and you know, incorporate a business. The legislation says that, but it doesn't stop there. It says that whereas an individual can incorporate, that individual must have someone to certify that they are of sound mind. That's right. So at section 4.3, it reads, Mr. President, that if articles of incorporation submitted to the registrar are accompanied by a statutory declaration by an attorney at law that to the best of his knowledge and belief, no signatory to the articles is an individual described in the section above, that is, that individual is of sound mind. So the truth is, Mr. President, that the attorney at law in the past was simply certifying that applicant was of sound mind. And to do so, that applicant ended up paying a significant sum because in certifying the application, well, the attorney proceeded to incorporate. But what we're seeking to do today, Mr. President, in this revision, in this amendment, is to now remove that provision. remove that clause, remove that requirement, so that the sole proprietor no longer has to rely on that attorney to certify his or her soundness of mind, but that they can, as the new amendment says, that they can send the articles of incorporation to the registrar together with a statutory declaration that the individual is of sound mind. Now, this is significant, Mr. President. This is significant economically, financially. It is significant even psychologically, because these thousands of sole proprietors who want now to go to the next level, as we encourage them to do, because we understand and we teach and train the importance of this. It limits liability because you're creating now another person in law, the company. So you're removing yourself as the individual somewhat, and limiting rather your liability as an individual in the operation, because you're creating now another entity, another person, if you will, in law. And not only that, you're able now to put the necessary governance structures in place to help you to grow your business. So we're encouraging today, through this amendment, that those thousands upon thousands of firms, those sole proprietors who want now to go to the next level, that they, Mr. President, can be enabled now to so do. That is significant. That is going to help, I believe, sir, in this process of doing business and improving this process of doing business. We understand and appreciate that not all the sole proprietors out there, not all of those who have the trading names, not all of those who even start a business will necessarily want to graduate along the growth path. We know that. We know that. They're those that we call the lifestyle, and they're comfortable with that. But that there are others, Mr. President, who wants to be able to have that opportunity for growth and development. We as a government must be able to facilitate that, and that is what this legislation is doing. And so when we encourage a little later on the formation, for example, of a junior market, and we encourage the development of the equity market, we are now saying to those businesses that may not have even contemplated in the past incorporation, that they can now consider this as a part of their growth model. That we can encourage them now to consider appointing, for example, a board, and attracting the skill sets and competencies to help direct that business through the formation of a board, to grow the operation, to grow the enterprise. Why? Because we have removed the inhibition of cost and the long process. Some of them, we know, Mr. President, have taken 4 weeks to incorporate that business, 5 weeks to incorporate that business for the individual. This, I think, Mr. President, is worthy of commendation. It is an improvement in the process for doing business. It is going to encourage those micro, small firms who otherwise may have found it difficult to take that next step to incorporation, to do so now. And Mr. President, I think this is good law, good legislation. And with those few words, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Holder. Senator Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I rise to wrap up the debate on this bill, I want to first of all commend all honourable members who have spoken, and to tell the honourable member on the other side, Senator Haynes, that I took due notice of her proposal to have a national Drake, sorry. Sorry, Senator Driggs, of her national score for businesses based on the environmental, social, and governance matters. But to also tell her, like Senator Adams mentioned, she would have noted that government was certainly not one of the first countries in CARICOM to rush to sign on, but we've been considering the entire matter. We recognize that we had to join, but we were concerned about process. And as Senator Adams informed, there are obviously things that we're looking at that will not be appropriate to disclose here. But we recognize what you've said in terms of other considerations and other areas and other tactics to use, and certainly we will be guided. Mr. President, I therefore want to just briefly state that I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Honourable Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Chairman, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
The question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Corporate Miscellaneous Provisions Act 2021.
The question is that this bill be now passed and so cited. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Order number 1, sir.
Order number 1.
In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of the parcel of land situate at Wake Park Road and Country Road, being the land of the former Louis Lynch Secondary School, together with the buildings thereon in the parish of St. Michael in this island, for sale to the West India Biscuit Company Limited.
Senator Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I believe that the clerk in his presentation could, in effect, would have said almost all that needs to be said at this point in time. But, Mr. President, I will not be like that. I think all honourable members are aware of the issues related to the the then Louis Link Secondary School. You in particular, sir, as I believe you were the Minister of Education at the time when matters reached a pinnacle. The Louis Link School opened in 1978, I believe, and shortly thereafter, after its opening, probably about within 10 years, there were various little complaints about environmental issues associated at the school, certainly highlighted with some drama in newspaper articles where attempts were made to relate various cancers with the environmental conditions at the school at the time. And the University of West Indies was commissioned to undertake a detailed study of the conditions at that school at the time. And Mr. President, as you are well aware, there were compendious reports which were prepared. I believe there were a number of preliminary reports and other reports, and indeed a final report. I note in passing that a question has been asked which will not be addressed today, but suffice it to say the final report was completed in July 2006, and it spoke to certain matters related to environmental conditions at that school at that time. Suffice it to say that over the years since it has been closed, a number of requests, and the ministry was transferred, the responsibility was transferred to the Ministry of Housing, I believe, back in 2010. And over the ensuing years, a number of proposals were written to the ministry for various uses of that facility. As you can see that there was a request from an offshore medical school to utilize it. There was a request from the Boy Scouts Association. There was a request from some other training to have some other training facility established there. Of importance was that the EPD reviewed the findings, the findings of that final report. And I'll just be brief, Mr. President, if you permit me. They looked at the ambient air chemical monitoring, they looked at soil tests, they looked at air quality testing, they looked at microbiological testing, and ambient air particulate monitoring was carried out. And in summary, essentially, as it related to the ambient air chemical monitoring, there were at least 6 volatile organic compounds that were detected. These being D-limonene, 2-ethyl-1-hexanol, kerosene, tetrachloroethylene, toluene, and xylenes. And of course, these are used by a number of companies in that area. Of significance, it was the final report showed that the levels of these volatile organic compounds were below the Occupational Safety and Health Administration recommended levels. As it related to the soil tests, the concern was the presence of phenol in the soil. But again, the EPD's conclusion on the phenol concentration was that the highest was about 23.0 parts per million, plus or minus 1.50, not considered to be a significant health or environmental threat. As it related to the indoor air quality, the main conclusion was that there was a lack of proper ventilation in many parts of the school. As it related to microbiological testing, it found to be generally acceptable except for the staff room and a book room. And as it relates to ambient air particulate monitoring, it was determined that the concentration of particulates in the air was below what is considered to pose a health hazard. Hence, the EPD is supportive of the use of the building and not its demolition. The Ministry of Education and Technology had no issues, and WIBISCO had offered, which is in the resolution before us, to pay government $6.5 million for the building. And the agreement, the government is agreeable to that because the building was not really being utilized properly. The complaints against it for several years. Persons were unwilling to, certainly there was a consideration of placing offices there at one time for various entities, and the issue of possible environmental issues was still raised in spite of the report, in spite of the EPD conclusions. And for the last 14 years, the property has been used only for storage, and it's continued to deteriorate. So the ministry has agreed in the circumstances where an offer of $6.5 million is being proposed that they should go ahead. And hence the reason for this resolution. And Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Walker. Senator Franklin.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I shan't be long. I just have a few questions. Right, that building is located right next to my office. And I remember one day looking through the window and see one of those people who you might consider power taking in his stove. And he was furnishing the place. So it was being used by Senator Walcott. And for more than storage, there are several tenants in there. I don't know if they're paying rent, but a good few of them have taken up residence. Be that as it may, sir, my concern is not that you're going to dispossess those people, because I know the government have been housing squatters and finding alternative accommodation for them, so you might just do that. My concern, sir, is why sell this property to West India Biscuit Company? They have a large complex, and there's a playing field that they have out there that is not a community playing field. Nobody else can play on it. They can't even get in. And if we're going to have a centrally located place like this, I do not believe that you should take it away from the public. Mind you, that is still, if it's the place is still environmentally sound, because I have my questions about that. This morning, Dr. Maynard asked a question, but I would like to see that question answered before this problem go through, because I know of several teachers and students of that school who got ill and died from various cancers, and it was more so than the, yes, it's anecdotal, but it is more so than the average. I even had a nephew who went to school there, and he was always having some issues, and when they closed the school, he went to CP. The boy became healthy again. So whether it is proven or people didn't look to find what was actually there, in my own family, there's enough evidence for me to suggest that there is a problem there. Now, if there's a problem there, I don't think you should sell it to anybody, because you're just going to be transferring the problem. I think that place needs to be cleaned up properly before you sell it, and I don't believe that it should be sold to the West India Biscuit Company. They have a large complex out there, and it is not really a button and a bounding on their property. So it is not, they're expanding their footprint. I still don't understand it, and I still don't understand why it has not been offered publicly. The government should put it up for sale and say, well, this property is up for sale, and do not go there with these various deals with people who you go and have these negotiations with and come to some conclusion. Who is to say that somebody wouldn't have paid 10 million if it were on the market? It wasn't on the market. We're going to stop doing these type of deals with people. I can't even say your friends, because I don't know if you've got any friends over there, but it doesn't look good. It is not yours. It is public property, and when you sell...
Mr. President, I'm sorry to interrupt you, remember, but to say that we are doing a deal, government is doing a deal, I think that I've stated clearly that an offer was made with this law. I've said that the building, and he admits it, that there was storage and occasional paroles. I've said that the EPD has cleared the building from an environmental perspective. And to say that it is a deal that government is doing. I also said that there were other offers where persons proposed to have use of the building. Clearly, the Ministry of Housing would have looked at what these persons were putting forward. So I really think it is reprehensible that the honourable member would get up in here and try to imply that the government, through the Ministry of Housing, is making some sort of deal with Bisco. And I beg that he asks to withdraw that comment, Mr. President.
Mr. President, if I sell him my phone, I'm making a deal with him. It is a big thing. He doesn't understand the word deal.
Senator Franklin, we know the usual imputation of making a deal. You know the rules very well.
Sir,
you'll withdraw the imputation and press on.
That was the farthest thing from my mind. I'm not talking about underhand deal or anything like that. I'm saying it was you're making a deal with them rather than coming me, because I might want to expand my business. After all, I'm getting more members. All right.
Unless, Senator Franklin, you want to make an offer for the property as it is adjacent to your existing location.
I'll have to go and get the executive to endorse that. You know. But I think I can scrap that, but
continue, Senator Franklin.
Sir, I just like transparency, and this doesn't look transparent. This is as transparent as mud. And I was going to say offload, and I said deal rather than say, but I suppose Senator Walker prefer that I said the government offload it on these people. Well, I will withdraw a deal, and I will say that the government is offloading this property on the West India Biscuit Company, when, in fact, sir, I feel that it should have gone on the open market, and not just people sending in requests to use government property, because they saw government property that I would like to use, but no, they're fixing it from my own offices, but I'm not C2 SAP to get government deals. You know, they pay the government pays their staff, and it pays their rent, and pays everything. Nobody don't pay that for me. So don't even fix my road. You know, they fix all the roads around me and then fix mine. You know, so when you you know, so my concern, sir, and I'm very serious about this, why Bastille Biscuit Company and why the government chose to put it on the market, didn't choose to put it on the market, and why you choose to vest it in national housing, then to transfer, because there's a procedure in the Crown vesting, and procedure that where you come through Parliament and you get all of these details that I'm asking for in the resolution before the House, and everybody can debate, and it comes here. What happens here now, the minister can make some policy and give the board of the National Housing Corporation, because the board of National Housing Corporation essentially is for housing, and in some instances slum clearance and all kind of stuff. But what is happening here, that this is probably outside of what the National Housing Corporation was intended to do. The National Housing Corporation out there sort of facilitate corporate entities to acquire property in Barbados, even though I saw them try it before. And I know the government is strapped for cash because they're paying too much of it to their consultants, and now they want back more. But this is hurried, it is rushed, and I think you are skirting with the procedures to offload. I was going to make this deal, but to offload, you're objecting to the deal, to offload this property. I would still like to see it properly tested and the results of the test made public, because I have not seen or heard any reports, and if they were available, I'm sure Dr. Menard, so highly placed and highly favored, would have gotten a copy of the report and would have seen it. He would not be asking those questions this morning. So, right, so, but no, you have the report, but you don't share it to anybody else. it could very well be a nice report that's saying that you can grow orchids on the property or whatever else. I don't know. Nobody else knows but you. Government is not supposed to be about a secret. If we don't have secret government, we shouldn't. But not available to the public and not available to the persons who claim that they were harmed on that property. Right? It is not available. Certainly not to me. I've not seen it, and I was interested in it. I'd be grateful if you don't only make a document of the House, but you're making a document available to the public. I don't know what's in the report. And if it is cleared, I'm seeing that it is cleared in this addendum to the resolution that might not even, you didn't actually say it, but you implied that it is okay for sale and that kind of stuff. So I figured, well, the government would not be selling bad things. But mind you, you're giving very bad things, you give very vaccine. But so if this is no part of the new where government do business, where you start giving away and selling things that are not good, so be it. But we need more than this, sir. And that's all I have to say on this matter. It doesn't look good.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. Senator Mr. Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, as an independent senator, it is not my role to obstruct the business of government, and I don't wish to do so. Now, but there's some things, Mr. President, that need to be said. 15 years ago, the Louis Secondary School was closed, and the then Minister of Education presided over the closure. And I credited that minister with some wisdom, and time has not proven me wrong. I believe the school was closed in the interest of protecting the future. And that future involved the 700 plus children at the school and the teachers who were exposed to some things at the school which the government at the time determined should not continue. Senator Walcott flashed some paper a moment ago that he has privy to. Presumably these are documents relating to what was found during the various studies at the school. I have myself, Mr. President, as a medical profession, seen some that were sent to me officially because there were lawsuits. And there have been settlements, Mr. President. And there have been documents signed for non-disclosure. What worries me, Mr. President, is this: if, as a government, we discover something in a school where young children are exposed that we are worried might affect their future, and we close the school and disperse all the children all over the country and the teachers, then we have an obligation in this climate of openness, to tell people what it was. A lot of time has passed, and this resolution seeks to pass this property on to another entity. There's a playing field owned by Wabisco, and I think in the other place it was stated that in part that field will be in the future used for the expansion of the company, and the field will shift on to this property. I have not seen a report from the EPD, so I don't know what the current status of the property is. However, the reports that were sent to me as a professional minister of patients spoke otherwise. And I am concerned that in the long term, if some of the things that were described have not been cleared, then we'll be doing our people a disservice if we don't tell them the truth. So I call upon all those who have the documents, Mr. President, to make them available so that we can see them and we can feel comfortable that whether it is elderly people or young people who will be occupying that space, that they're safe. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Leonard. Senator Greenwich.
Mr. President, I was not going to say anything on this matter, but having heard Senator Maynard and Senator Franklin, I just want to make a few comments, almost in response to what was said. I begin by saying, yes, Mr. President, I agree that the property is being sold with a history, a past history of an environmental problem. Sir, this environmental problem was no secret. And I am positive that the purchaser in this instance knew of the problem. And the reason why I say this, sir, is that the same tests which used to be carried on at the Louis School also used to be carried on virtually simultaneously at the next door neighbor, Wibisco. So there's nothing here which the vendor can hide from the purchaser. The purchaser knew of this problem all from the very beginning. The other thing is this, that we do not want to be acting as the attorneys at law for the purchaser. The attorneys at law have a particular time, it comes during the sale, that they do what is called requisitions. And any attorney at law working for the purchaser in this instance, I'm sure, would have asked a question like, can the vendor specify or describe any problem, environmental or otherwise, which the purchaser should know about? And at that stage, you can ask them to specify what has happened, what is happening, what is the status. So we should not get in here and try to pretend that we are doing the work of the attorney at law for the purchaser. Sir, this was never a hush-hush matter. The Roebuck Secondary Luminance, whatever we call it, that facing an environmental problem, everybody knew about that. And we shouldn't try to give the impression that government is trying to sell Wibisco something bad deliberately. We should not give that impression inside here. Nothing about this property was ever swept under the carpet. Nothing. Everybody read about this matter in the newspaper. It was a most publicized matter, Mr. President. There's nobody, sir, of a knowledgeable age who did not hear about this. Indeed, sir, I do believe that you may get someone who is presently at high school or just going into university who will tell you that I heard of that matter when I was in primary school. Nothing about this matter was ever hidden. So even maybe teenagers can look you in the face and tell you, I heard of this matter. So I don't think that we should get in here and pretend that we are privy to information that the purchasers and anybody else out there did not know about. That is not true. It is not like I'm selling a car where I am the only person who know what the defect in the car is and so on. This is a matter that was widely discussed. This is not, I'm not trying to pull a fast one on an unsuspecting purchaser, not at all. Sir, what is also true is that there is an element of risk in purchasing any property, environmental or otherwise. And we can't tell people what to purchase either. Sir, land is described in law as the material of the earth. And that includes the soil, the dirt, the hard rock under there, the gold, if you got gold, the oil, if there's oil, or whatever else is beneath the surface. Yes. And sometimes you are in luck when you purchase land. Sometimes you are in luck. You may purchase some that got some gold on there. There's a risk. There is a risk. But sometimes you look at a plan because all that has come before you is a little drawing of a little square on a piece of paper, but you don't get up and go and look to see exactly what you're buying. You just look at the paper and you feel it's good flat land. And you end up buying a gully. You end up buying a hollow hole. You don't know because you didn't look. There's a risk. You end up buying a landfill sometimes. But you don't know. And sometimes you take legal action against the person that you bought it for. And the court rules that there was nothing wrong with the sale at all. And it's a bona fide purchase. And there's nothing you can do about it. It is not an unfair sale. So I don't wish the government is trying to pull a fast one on somebody here. People are purchasing the property that know about the property. And the other thing too, sir, is that the purchase of land is a very, very personal thing. Very personal thing. I know of persons, sir, who bought land in places in Barbados that I would not give $2.50 for. I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't buy it. Not even if they were selling me the whole piece for $2.50, not per square foot, for the whole piece. Not my $2.50. I wouldn't do it. And sir, about half an hour after I turn it down, you know somebody may pass along and see the piece of land and pay $100,000 for it. Nobody is being unfair. People buy land for various reasons. People buy land, Mr. President, because it is near to the relatives. Some may buy land because it is far away from the maddening crowd and they want to get away from everybody else. They want to be among the hills with the birds and the bees. Some of them may buy a piece of land because they want to plant certain things on the property. It's a very personal matter. In this case, Bibisco may very well be purchasing the property because it is next door to them. And the reason why they want it may far supersede any environmental problem that it might have had. That is not our business. That is not our business. If they want to buy it.
A point of order, Mr. Chairman. I think Senator Greenidge is misleading this thing. It is our business. When this is a government that has to look out for the workers, and that property has been accused of causing workers illness. If we best go to put people on that property, then it's the government's business. So don't tell me, you're talking like a lawyer who buying land for somebody else. But you're dealing with individuals out there, you're dealing with arm's length and stuff. What you are talking about now is a government who has a different role to play. And so when you're saying these things, it is not necessarily correct. So you're basically misleading the House. The government must look out for the interests of the workers. My point, the points I was making here was that the land is not known to be safe, and government cannot knowingly sell land that is not safe. So that's what we were asking. That's what Dr. Mender was asking. So don't give the impression that we were talking foolishness. We are not.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. I was hearing the honourable member the last several minutes making the legal position. So I took the statement in the context of the buyer and the seller looking after their respective interests.
But government is a different type of buyer. A seller.
Yes, Senator.
Sir, it seems as though we only have one person in Barbados who determines whether land is safe or not. Yes. Sir, the purchasers who are involved here are not what you can call fly-by-night people.
I can't call them that.
They, if they wanted to, they can bring their own people to do their own environmental assessment. They have the wherewithal, sir, to get the expertise to find out. These purchasers, sir, are business people. And they know what they want better than me or you or Senator Franklin, sir. Sir, we should not give people out there the impression that the purchasers do not know what they are doing. That is the point I am making. We should not give the impression that the purchasers do not know what they're doing. The environmental problem, sir, may not be as critical to the company as it was initially for children sitting in a classroom. And they have decided that they can make use of the property. So we don't know, maybe the laundry next door, sir, now has the machinery, maybe it's solar operated or what have you, and the risk no longer exists. So we do not know. Sir, as I said, the government had maybe, as Senator Walker was saying, about 3 choices. Sir, you refurbish the building and you could use it as government offices. But sir, if we had done that, sir, the public officers and a particular trade union that I know would say we are working, they would say we are not working under those conditions because that's a sick building. So that was virtually out. Government could have kept it closed. I know. Government could have kept it closed and do nothing. But if they had kept it closed and they had done nothing with it, I'm sure the opposition and the government critics would say, what a waste. This is a government that should be voted out for allowing the building to go to ruin. And the third option was to sell it. And sir, I asked Senator Franklin and anyone with his viewpoint to take their pick. I asked them. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Franklin. Senator Mr. Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I said when I spoke on the resolution initially, the study has been done. There's been a lot of anecdotal arguments in Barbados regarding the matters related to this Llewellyn Secondary School. The Honourable Senator has asked a number of questions, has posed questions to the appropriate minister. I have no doubt that the questions will be answered in due course and appropriately. Mr. President, I would just say if I was a bold person, I might even attempt to answer them this afternoon. There'll be 2 yeses and a no, but I don't know which particular order they will be in, because I believe 3 questions were posed. And the Honourable Senator made a note that I don't take unnecessary risks. Having come from both similar backgrounds as it relates to my previous endeavors and his present endeavors in the surgical theater, where you don't take risks unnecessarily so. But I would just say there are 2 positives and 2 yeses and 1 no. But he needs to work out the order and which questions they pertain to. As it relates to the comments of my good friend, Senator Franklin, I've taken note of his comments and his apparent concerns for the future of Wabisco and the manufacturing plant of Wabisco. I don't know how concerned he could be for the workers, because he attests that his office is right next door to this property. And if we are so concerned about the chemicals in the air and the soil conditions, where we have air blowing from one, I don't know that all of a sudden if you're next to a property and air is blowing and there are chemicals there, that the volatile organic chemicals would not affect him. Like
Yes,
it has
Mr.
to
President.
do with laminar flow,
Upon the water.
direction of
Right,
air
Senator.
flow.
I have a point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order?
I'm grateful that the leader is concerned about my health, but I'm getting sick as a result. All my senators give me birth trouble now. You know, so
Don't even go there.
yeah, I'm getting sick. I am on all kind of stuff. I gotta go and see the managers now.
Doping charges you a hefty bill. Not you, Mr. President, of course. Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Those honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. The things the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 4, sir.
Order number 4.
In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve the rescission of the resolution passed in the House of Assembly on the 7th day of May 2019, in the Senate on the 31st day of May 2019, assented to by Her Excellency the Governor General on the 5th day of June 2019, and published in the Official Gazette as Resolution Number 10, 2019, on the 10th day of June 2019, approving the lease to the Maria Holder Memorial Trust of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Upton in the parish of Christchurch in this island, for the purpose of constructing a skate park for public use.
Senator Mr. Walcott.
Mr. President, as I rise, I want to crave your indulgence. There are other items on the order paper. That's 5, 6, 7. I'm seeking your agreement to have a cognate debate, because all of them essentially, there are 2 rescissions related to the Maria Holder Memorial Trust and of course the Crown, and there are 2 new resolutions between the same entities, so I'm craving your indulgence.
The question is that we take items 4, 5, 6, is that correct? 4, 5, 6, 7 as a cognate debate. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Please proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that all honourable members are aware. All honourable members are aware of the Maria Holder Memorial Trust and the good work it has been doing in Barbados as it relates to primary schools, as it relates to the Ministry of Health in the past, and certainly in this matter of the land at Upton. So I said, they're first asking, there are 2 rescissions in effect, that both at Upton and in the case of Grandview Terrace, that essentially the initial resolutions that were passed spoke of the granting of a lease for 20 years, an option with the option to renew for further 20 years, which included a lease back to the Crown option. In discussions, the Maria Holder Trust, the Memorial Trust, is more amenable to a different arrangement. That is where we are suggesting now that they have agreed that it would be subject to terms and conditions which include the grant of a license to the Crown, so that at the end of the 20 years, then there's a license to the Crown. They see this as a tidy arrangement where they still have some oversight of it, but in certain terms of certain specific aspects of the agreement, it is the government, the Crown would be responsible. And Mr. Chairman, if you can indulge me, if I look at the addendum, at the second schedule, for example, for this item number 5, it speaks to, on pages 3 and 4, speaks to the matter about which I'm speaking. 3 of the second schedule gives you the terms and conditions, the lease arrangements, and then on 4 it speaks to completion in terms of the license in respect of the premises and what are the responsibilities of the Maria Holder Trust and indeed the Crown. I should also add on this matter of the facility Upton Lodge that the skate park is in fact completed and to be handed over to the government and people of Barbados. Similarly, at Grandview at Grandview, and I'm sure that the honourable member, as he claims that he's ill from time to time, but will certainly have the pleasures of perhaps utilizing or at least viewing this catering at Upton, which is now completed. And as it relates to the Grandview, where a nursery school has been built, I would say that my information is it has been completed, and that it is ready. The Maria Holder Memorial Trust is ready to hand over the same to be used in the new school year commencing in September 2021. Mr. President, with those few words and recognizing the time of the afternoon and the question that some honourable members on the other side have been indicating to me that they're feeling the pangs of hunger, I beg that this resolution do not pass. Resolution 4.
Okay. The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the approval of the lease to the Maria Holder Trust of the parcel of land, property of the Crown, situate at Upton in the parish of Christchurch in this island, for the purpose of constructing a skate park for public use.
Mr. President, I beg that the resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution to approve the rescission of the resolution passed in the House of Assembly on the 30th day of April 2019, in the Senate on the 31st day of May 2019, assented to by Her Excellency the Governor General on the 5th day of June 2019, and published in the Official Gazette as Resolution Number 11, 2019, on the 10th day of June 2019, approving the lease to the Maria Holder Memorial Trust of a parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Government Hill in the parish of St. Michael in this island, for the purpose of constructing a nursery school.
Senator Walker.
President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the passing of a resolution in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the approval of the lease to the Maria Holder Memorial Trust of the parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Government Hill in the parish of St. Michael in this island, for the purpose of constructing a nursery school.
Senator Walker.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Order number 3, sir.
Order number 3.
In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Statistics Validation of Listing Exercise Bill 2021.
Senator Mr. Walcott.
Mr. President, I believe this is a simple but embarrassing matter. I think we are all aware of the importance of the census, which normally occurs every 10 years. It was the government's intention to have the census last year, but because of COVID and the vicissitudes associated with the COVID pandemic, we've had to postpone it to this year. Indeed, it was in January this year that Cabinet made a decision that the census day for National Population and Housing Census would be August the 1st this year. At that meeting, Cabinet also agreed that there would be a census listing exercise prior to the census day. This is an exercise where buildings are counted to determine if they were commercial or residential, And preliminary information normally would be taken from the respondents. This was started, however, by the Census Office of the Statistical Services, and this was started in June. Officers were hired, there were reserves, there was training, there were supervisors and senior supervisors. And this occurred from June the 7th to June 11th initially, and again from July the 1st to July the 6th. At which time it was discovered that they had these persons who were doing the listing and had no legal authority to operate as the appropriate census regulations, which were supposed to be done, had not been made and gazetted. And this was an oversight, obviously, on the part of the department. The whole measure today is seeking to validate what has happened, because they gathered information without any legal authority to do so. I think members would appreciate the importance of the census and gathering information to allow government to plan its processes as it relates to planning and delivering and identifying the issues in a society. And it is done, as I said, every 10 years normally. Other countries in the Caribbean have had similar problems, which were supposed to have had them last year. They've had to postpone them to this year, and indeed some have done so to 2022. As I said, the process is expected to start, would have started more or less from the 1st of August. That was announced, the order was given. There has been some issues initially with those persons who were involved in the census exercise, I believe, and the honourable member from the honourable leader of the other side is not here currently, where some persons who started off in this census have had some initial difficulties in terms of their payments. And it is due in part to a burdensome system where the persons in the accounts department wanted to prove the number of records completed by field officers and before they could agree to the payments. And this is being rectified. They've simplified it and have devised now an automatic payment approval system. Once the officers enter the records from the field, then we expect that the issues that occurred with payment will not occur anymore, will certainly be rectified. Mr. President, I don't plan to be long, and with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time, as I recognize that my colleague on the other side is extremely keen to speak on the census. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will try my best to make my contribution as short as possible. I don't want to get in between the honourable members, between them and their lunch, but there are a few things that I would like to say. I would like to say associated with this Statistics Validation of Listing Exercise Bill 2021, Mr. President. Sir, because as short as the bill may be, it does have significant implications and is tied to the development planning of Barbados, and it would be remiss of me not to say a few words. Sir, and I would start off by saying there's an adage that goes, we measure what matters. The things that we want to know about, the things that we are curious about, the things that we want to make decisions about, those are the things that we measure, Mr. President. And that is why when you are trying to run the affairs of a country, a census is so important, because the census basically lets you know what is the profile of your population as it relates to things like the age of your population, what is the gender profile, the income status, the religious beliefs. All of these things are captured. All of this data and this information is captured within the census. And sir, what comes out of that is then you're then able to gauge from a policy perspective, how do you accommodate the needs of those persons within your nation, within your country, appropriately, Mr. President. Sir, but what happens sometimes, particularly with data gathering exercise such as this, is sometimes the data does not actually link up with the policy for many different reasons. Sometimes the data simply does not exist. There are many times, because of resource constraints, we don't have the data to inform the type of policies that we want to implement. Sometimes the data does exist, but it is dated, like we have at the moment, as the leader of government business just said. The last census we had was in 2010. Because of COVID, we had to curtail that exercise, and now we're in 2021 without any real indication of where we are as a population and as a country. Sometimes, sir, the data does exist, but it is not shared. And this is coming from a personal perspective, and clearly just now we heard in the last debate, data and information is available, but for whatever reason it is not widely shared. In my own personal experience, particularly as it relates to census data, I do know that the statistical department does not share income data by geographical location. And I don't know if that is a privacy and security reason, but it is not necessarily shared by geographical location. So questions like what is the income inequality between the parish of Christchurch compared to St. Lucie, for instance, researchers would not be able to garner that kind of information and analysis. Sir, and then sometimes the data is in conflict with political agendas or short-term priorities. All of these things, Mr. President, hamper what is called science-driven policy making. And I am sure that when the government completes the census exercise, that they would be in a better position to make policies and plans for the country going forward. But sir, what is clear is that given the challenges that we face both economically on the international arena, we talked about that earlier this morning, there is a need for us to move into a space where we are adapting and changing very quickly, Mr. President. And I know that as government also seeks to have a political transformation in moving Barbados to a republic, I believe that they are squandering an opportunity as well to kind of take stock of where we are, Mr. President, and not just have that political transformation happen, but also a societal and economic evolution of Barbados. And I believe that the information that may come out of the census can chart or mount a platform by which we are very clear on where we want to go in a 10-year time span in the future, Mr. President. So that is one caveat that I have, is that based on the political maturity that we want to show the rest of the world, it seems that we're still lagging somewhat in our understanding of where we want to go as a society and what type of economy that we have envisioned for Barbadians. Sir, and I say that because many of the social contracts or the social beliefs that we have as a people, and we take them for granted, have been challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, a worker in the tourism industry got up, went to work, and they assumed because there is institutional confidence in the national insurance scheme that if anything happens to them, they would have been able, in the appropriate time frame, to receive either unemployment benefits or their severance. So we saw what that outcome was. Many workers were left wanting in that situation due to, yes, it was a crisis that occurred, but nonetheless, it left a lot of people questioning what is this institutional arrangement and how do they work for me in the event that I need assistance from the government, or what is, in the case of unemployment benefits or severance, that is rightly owed to them. Sir, I'm tying all of this together because I really want to say that COVID has literally been an earthquake in our society. It has really shown up where there is a lot of problems in our institutions. And what I want to say is that COVID is the opening act for what is to come in the next 10 years. it is the opening act, because the climate crisis and the rate by which extreme events are happening, not will happen, I think we've passed that stage, given all that's in the news as it relates to whether it be floods in Trinidad and tornadoes, I think, as well, the fires all across parts of Europe, the warming temperatures across the United States. All of these things will have an impact on how we as a country adapt and become resilient to the changing environment. And I believe that the census now, tying it all back in, I believe the census now should collect the data that allows us to have a broader spectrum of information about our profile as a nation. I know traditionally it looks at the demographics of the population and then parts of our infrastructure, but I believe given the challenges that we're going to face, included in that instrument should be other key areas by which we are interested in terms of our development going forward. Mr. President, I say that on the backdrop of two areas that are going to be of extreme importance to us as a small island developing state. That is our access to food and our access to water. And, sir, what I find interesting is when you move around Barbados, there are a lot of unoccupied buildings and derelict buildings and commercial properties that are unused. We just had the resolution before that seeks to make some transitions as it relates to unused properties. But, sir, I go a bit further. Can we then assume that some of these buildings are in a good enough condition so that they can be used for productive purposes if that is what is appropriate? For instance, sir, if we are saying that there is increasing food security across Barbados, and now with COVID, that situation has become even more detrimental, there is the disruption in international supply chains, as I just said, to the increasing extreme weather events, then why are we not having a multi-pronged approach to food production and putting some of these unoccupied buildings, whether they're public or private, where the government then makes some arrangements with those private owners to make these buildings, turn these buildings into what I would call grow houses. Sir, MIT, the Massachusetts Institute for Technology, stated that vertical farming can produce 200% more food per square meter than traditional agriculture. And if it is the case that we have a situation that food is becoming less accessible to persons in Barbados, whether it be in relation to prices and so on, can vertical farming using a lot of these unoccupied buildings in Barbados be a long-term strategy that seeks to supplement the traditional outdoor farming that we have in Barbados, given that traditional farming is also exposed to the elements and at risk to extreme weather events? Sir, I say that on the backdrop as well that the prevalence of undernourishment in Barbados is about 4%. If we assume a population of about 300,000 persons, Mr. President, that is about 12,000 persons in Barbados that are undernourished. Sir, in addition to that, the last Barbados survey on living conditions with data for 2016 noted that the poverty rate in Barbados, or the persons living in impoverished situations, moved from 15.1% in 2010, which is about 45,000 persons in Barbados, to 17.2%, which is about 51,000 individuals. So it begs the question then, if that is the scenario that occurred in 2016, where we had a poverty rate of 17.2%, then we can only assume that with the advent of COVID and the rising number of unemployment that we had in 2020 and rolling into 2021, where the unemployment rate, the last rate that I heard was, I believe it was 17%, around just about 17%. It has to mean then that this issue of food security and food production must be paramount in any of our planning going forward, Mr. President. And what the census can do then is give us the data to allow us to know what unoccupied buildings exist in Barbados, can they be appropriate for food production, and then possibly those vulnerable persons that you've identified in the census, those who live in overcrowded homes, single parent households, can you then utilize that information to come up with a project with the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute, CARDI, or the University of the West Indies? You train those individuals in those vulnerable households using the unoccupied buildings in a food production program. Mr. President, what that would do is create direct access links to persons who otherwise could not afford to access nutritious foods. Sir, what that project would do is increase food production, intensifying the use of technology in agriculture, also incorporating some of the local knowledge, because we know sometimes the technology, yes, exists abroad, but because of the local conditions, we would need to adapt appropriately. So it would create meaningful work, and it could be also a form of community service, and it would repurpose a lot of the infrastructure that sometimes is just breeding grounds for rodents and dumping sites, Mr. President. So, sir, I just wanted to make that small intervention. There are some other notes that I have here as it relates to unoccupied buildings and other possible solutions, like low-rate leasing for entrepreneurs. There are a lot of entrepreneurs in Barbados who would like a space. I'm sure Senator Holder would attest to that and agree to that. They have the provisions to upscale their business, but they cannot afford a lot of the rental rates that exist as it relates to renting commercial property. So these are the types of areas for me that I think not only just looking at the census in terms of resilience, in terms of climate, but also how can we enhance our social resilience and create multi-pronged approaches that then speak to a lot of the challenges that we will face in the next 10 years, Mr. President. And with those few words, I won't keep us from lunch. I am obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Drix. Senator Mr. Maynard.
Mr. President, I will not detain this chamber for long. Senator Drix referred to COVID-19 as an earthquake. Sir, I put it to you as more like wind, blowing in all places at one time and more intense in some places. And I rise only, Mr. President, to say that I wish to personally thank all the young people who participated in that survey. And I think that at a time when people were so afraid, there were a large number of young people who came out on the streets and visited every household and recorded that data. And I think they're to be congratulated. The disappointment for me was that there wasn't more medical participation among the younger people, community profession. And they missed an opportunity to participate in the biggest survey in the country in 10 years. And all the persons who participated can put on their CV that line, and it's an important line. And I hope that those who missed out on it, and I guess I'm too old now to worry about such things for me, will learn from this experience, and the next time there's an opportunity, jump on it. Because it was for the good of the country. I happened to be at home when the team passed my house, and I don't know if it was my dogs in the background that were standing up in the house, and there were four of them, that they didn't ask many questions. But I thought that there were probably a few questions that could have been asked, one-line questions that might have provided tremendous data. Simple things like, maybe a couple questions thrown in on chronic diseases. It was a great opportunity because there are men and women at home. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Mr. Maynard. Senator Mr. Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the two honourable senators for their contributions. I want to let Senator Drakes know that I have taken note of her very useful ideas as it relates to the census. I think we all recognize that the importance of a census and usefulness. And of course, it would be remiss of me not to join Senator Maynard in commending those over 400 young persons who participated in the midst of the shutdown in February in the COVID crisis then, going house to house and gathering some very useful information. It might not have been as detailed as it relates to chronic diseases, but we do have, as I was thinking, we've had like almost like a mini health census, and now we have a census. So I believe that certainly the planners would have a plethora of information that they can use and data. Certainly in that way, while we were focusing on COVID, there were information was gathered as it related to environmental conditions, as it related to dengue fever, and of course relations to chronic diseases, because we were looking at the possibility of comorbidities in our population. There's a lot of useful information. I think the issue now is not just collecting the information, but as Senator Drake said, making use of this information for the future and the development of Barbados, and it could all inure to the benefit of us all, and certainly to the future generations coming as we plan our policies and our programs. Mr. President, with those words, I want to beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that this bill be read a second time. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honour do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Honourable Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Senate is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
So, Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you don't report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honour the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported to me the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that this bill be read a third time. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the statistics validation of listing exercise Act 2021.
The question is that this bill be now passed and so cited. Honourable senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is now passed and so cited.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of our business for today, and I beg to move that the Senate be now adjourned. Sign it.
The question is that this sitting, the Honourable Senate, did not adjourn, sign it aye. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. Senate now stands adjourned.